Ahoy! As most of you guys are aware, I'm somebody who's interested in what we can learn from data. And what I'd like to do from time to time is just have a look at the best performing gods in Conquest, specifically in Ranked, and see who is rising to the top, if there are any unexpected ones in there, any newcomers that haven't been there for a long time, or anything else that's unusual. And at the moment there are quite a few unusual things, but I want to focus on one particular one today, and that is a god that has not really been in the spotlight for a very long time, that is not seeing any competitive play, by the way, so far, but is incredibly strong at the moment in Ranked, is performing very, very well, especially on the higher levels, but also across all ranks. I'm going to show you the win rate here, and I'm going to let you guess for a second, based on the massive spike in win rate across all levels of play that we're seeing here. Who do you think this is? So it's clearly indicated by this massive spike that this increase came in context of a buff. We can see that this character was performing slightly above average across all ranks before, but also on a very balanced degree. Across the end of last season and this season, he usually bounced between 49 to 52% win rate, so very much in the middle. So what could have caused such a massive spike? What if I told you this spike is due to a 10% scaling increase on a single ability? And no, this is not an ability with a massive amount of ticks or something. This is just straight up an ability that has 10% scaling on its initial damage, and then if you confirm a second hit, you get an extra 15% damage, which is relatively low. So the total increase here is 11.5% under ideal circumstances. And if those weren't enough hints yet, the god in question is Baron Samedi. Fascinatingly enough, the little spike that he received here made his win rate skyrocket so drastically that I don't think Hi-Rez was even anticipating this at all. The reason for that change when they made it was the party is going to keep on going until Baron can successfully play the mid lane. Most recent small damage buffs have moved him in the right direction, but he's not quite there. There's still plenty of incentives to build him hybrid or tanky, so we're looking to increase the power scaling on his primary damaging ability. And while his win rate was slightly above 50%, I don't think that was inherently unwarranted. Again, he basically saw no competitive play with a little bit of an outlier early in the season. He also was not consistently picked in middle lane, he was basically picked across all lanes, and pushing him into mid lane required something that would give him a buff on mid lane, with the option to nerf him in other places later if he performs well there. But still, this leading to this immense boost as an outcome of it is fascinating to me. Now at this point there are a few questions that you may have. On one hand, for example, how is he performing across all levels of play separately? And also, is he actually being played as a mid laner now? And let me try and answer those. First, let's look at his win rate across all ranks. While we can see that his win rate in Bronze is low with 44.86%, keep in mind here that Bronze players play against Silver players and lose more games because of that, so god win rates are often lower there. And from Silver onwards, he's looking pretty good. In Silver, Gold, Platinum and Diamond, his win rate is between 55 and 56%. In Masters, his win rate is 61.54%. Grandmasters even slightly higher, but that doesn't really matter because the player base there is as small as the player base in Bronze or even lower, so the sample size is not sufficient. Interesting enough, his pick rate on the other hand is higher the lower you go in ranks. It's literally a staircase that you can walk down from Bronze to Grandmaster here, but you can see that the higher the level of play, the less he's picked. This is obviously at least partially because people at higher levels of play know much better how to counter a god like Samedi. Anti-heal is definitely built there, counter picks are being made, and low mobility characters get abused more than it's the case on lower levels of play. But as we now know, in the games where he is picked, he is performing incredibly well. And now let's look a little bit at the items, because the items can tell us where he's actually being played. If we look at all ranks, then we can first of all see that the most picked item is Shoes of Focus, and that's because you can pick it in any role with him, and it's just a very efficient item for him, giving his heal especially a lower cooldown as well as his debuff from his 1. The most popular item after that is Divine Ruin. That's just because Divine Ruin is such an important item in general. I would say this is something that you would primarily see on him being built in mid lane, but at the same time I could totally see this being built on a solo in late game as well, or on a support Samedi if your team doesn't otherwise have enough anti-heal. So I would say primarily mid, but still has its place everywhere. And the third most popular item already is Breastplate of Valor, so this is definitely something you would be more likely to see either on solo Samedi or on support Samedi. Chronos Pendant is again more of a mid-leaning item, also highly popular, so we can definitely say he is being picked across the board. The next item is Voidstone, again something you could see both in support and in solo. After that we have Lotus Crown, something you can literally build on Samedi everywhere. Even on a mid lane Samedi, this could make sense as a single protection item in later stages of the game. The same is once again true for Soul Gem and Ethereal Staff, whereas Gauntlet of Thebes is very obviously a support item. So across all ranks, Samedi is definitely being played in solo as well as mid, but also in support. He's not the most prominent support, otherwise we would see more slots for Thebes here, but overall, still a decent number, especially considering some people will build support without Thebes as well. If we instead focus on the higher levels of play, being Diamond Plus, then we can see that the most prominent item is once again Shoes of Focus, and after that comes Breastplate of Valor. So here we can definitely see him being used more in solo lane, which is also indicated by the fact that Breastplate of Valor is more prominent here than any non-situational items or any other items that would work in his favor in other lanes, because Breastplate of Valor is something you only really want to run early against physical characters, whereas if you're against the magical, you're not going to build this. So I would say his primary role here seems to be solo. Divine Ruin is still picked up a decent amount, but again, not quite as much. With Lotus Crown and Voidstone also being very popular still, I would once again argue for solo in that regard. And then on the second page we start seeing some items that you could also pick up in middle lane with Ethereal Staff, Chronos Pendant, Doom Up and Soul Reaver. If you go further beyond that, you'll also find some support items, but those could also be built on solo Samedi in late game. I would say that support Samedi is definitely less popular on this level of play. This is, by the way, not the first buff that Baron Samedi received this season. At the start of the season, in patch 7.1, he got the base damage on his Vivid Gaze increased from 60 to 240 to 80 to 240, which gave him a fair bit better early clear. This led to a very brief spike on higher levels of play, but didn't really last in the long run. I'm not sure if this was down to other item changes maybe, because major items had just been overhauled, but either way it did not last, and across all levels of play it wasn't even that noticeable. In patch 7.7 he also received multiple buffs, with Vivid Gaze seeing its damage increased once again, now from 80 to 240 to 90 to 250, giving not only a little bit more early game clear again, but also some more late game damage. Wrap It Up also got the scaling increased from 5% to 8%, so from 25% total to 40%. So overall he's seen quite a few scaling increases in the season and quite a few assistance buffs to his one to help him clear better and also put more pressure on the enemy. And this is not entirely unimportant because his one only has a 9-second cooldown and also applies pretty massive debuffs to enemies with its 30% power reduction and 30% attack speed reduction. This is something that most certainly is better utilized on higher levels of play, which is why I think we're seeing so much of a spike as well. On high levels of play, you much more frequently see the ultimate being used to apply Hysteria, as well as obviously the other abilities, and then you see other effects being utilized afterwards, and that is something where the one really shines because this is a very strong effect, and if you can utilize this ability multiple times with higher damage, they can easily become at least 20% scaling increase, and then when you also factor in the scaling increase on the 3, it adds up. I'm very interested to see what that means for Samedi in the long run, if he's actually gonna get picked up in the SPL, or if he's gonna be one of those gods that kind of does what Arachne did for a long time, where she does very well in ranked but just doesn't get picked in competitive because of the risk involved. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this overview of the performance of this sleeper god, and with that, thank you guys very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, feel the sub button and maybe the bell. We have some data mining coming up soon, as well as some other Smite related stuff, as well as some stuff about other games. I hope to see you for the next one soon. Duke Sloth, out.